Born into slavery, Harriet escapes and becomes a brave rescuer. She returns again and again to guide hundreds of enslaved people to freedom, risking her life each time for justice. Born Armenteros around 1822 in Dorchester County, Maryland, the woman who would become known as Harriet Tubman entered a world defined by brutal bondage. Her early life was a harsh tapestry of relentless labor, constant threat, and the ever-present sorrow of family separation. From a young age, she was hired out to various masters, enduring backbreaking work in the fields and as a domestic servant. The physical and the emotional scars of this period were profound. A severe head injury, inflicted by an overseer who threw a heavy metal weight at another enslaved person, would cause her to suffer from debilitating headaches, seizures, and vivid visions for the rest of her life. Yet, it was within this crucible of suffering that an unquenchable spirit of defiance was forged. Harriet listened to whispers of freedom, tales of the North Star, and the secret networks that promised a life beyond chains. The dream of liberty took root in her heart, not just for herself, but for all her people. In 1849, the looming threat of being sold further south, away from her family and everything she knew, became the catalyst for her own flight to freedom. The decision was agonizing. Leaving behind her husband, her parents, and her siblings was a heart-wrenching choice, a leap into a vast and dangerous unknown. Guided by the North Star and aided by the clandestine network of safe houses and the abolitionist allies known as the Underground Railroad, Harriet embarked on a perilous journey of nearly 100 miles. She traveled by night, hiding in swamps, forests, and the homes of strangers who shared her belief in human dignity. Every shadow could conceal a patrol, every barking that could signal her capture and a return to a fate worse than death. But her resolve was stronger than her fear. When she finally crossed the state line into the free soil of Pennsylvania, a wave of profound relief washed over her. She would later recall, when he found he had crossed that line, he looked at my hands to see if he was the same person. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through the trees, and over the fields, and he felt like he was in heaven. But the taste of personal freedom was not enough. The joy of her own liberation was overshadowed by the painful knowledge that her loved ones remained in bondage. Harriet's vision of heaven could not be complete while her family and her people suffered. It was this profound sense of empathy and the responsibility that transformed her from a fugitive into a rescuer. She resolved to go back. This decision was monumental, defying all logic and self-preservation. To willingly return to the very place from which she had so narrowly escaped was an act of almost unimaginable courage. She knew the routes, she understood the dangers, and she possessed a steely determination that inspired trust in those she sought to help. She became a conductor on the Underground Railroad, one of its most famous and successful. Armed with a pistol for protection and a deep faith in God, she began her missions, venturing back into the heart of slave territory. Her first rescue mission was to bring back her sister and her sister's children. This was just the beginning. Over the next decade, Harriet Tubman would make approximately 13 return trips into the treacherous landscapes of the South. She became a phantom of hope in the slave quarters, a figure of legend known as Moses for her ability to lead her people out of bondage. Her methods were meticulous and strict. She conducted her operations primarily in the winter, when the longer nights provided more cover. She demanded absolute silence and obedience from her groups, knowing that a single mistake could doom them all. She used spirituals as coded signals to communicate messages about timing and danger. If anyone faltered, overcome by fear or exhaustion and wanting to turn back, Harriet would reportedly draw her weapon and declare, "You'll be free or die." It was a harsh but necessary rule. A single person turning back could betray the entire group and compromise the entire network. Her reputation grew among both enslaved people and slaveholders. To the former, she was a savior. To the latter, she was a notorious and wanted criminal, with a massive bounty placed on her head. Yet, she was never captured, and remarkably, she would later boast that in all her journeys as a conductor, she never ran my train off the track and never lost a passenger. Her work extended far beyond the Underground Railroad. When the Civil War erupted, Harriet immediately offered her services to the Union Army, seeing the conflict as the definitive battle against the evil of slavery. She began as a cook and a nurse, using her knowledge of herbal remedies to treat sick and wounded soldiers. But her skills and intelligence were quickly recognized for more strategic roles. She became a valuable scout and spy, moving fluidly through Confederate territory, gathering crucial intelligence from enslaved people who trusted her. Her most famous military action was the Combahee River Raid in South Carolina in ke-1863. Working alongside Colonel James Montgomery, Harriet guided Union gunboats along the river, using her knowledge of the terrain to avoid Confederate mines. The raid was a spectacular success, liberating more than 750 enslaved people, destroying plantations, and disrupting enemy supply lines. It was a historic moment, making her the first woman to lead an armed expedition in the war. She continued to risk her life, proving that her fight for freedom was not just about escape, but about the complete and the total abolition of the institution that had defined her early life. After the war, Harriet settled in Auburn, New York, on a piece of land sold to her by abolitionist Senator William Henry Seward. Her fight for justice, however, was far from over. She channeled her energy into new causes, becoming a powerful voice in the women's suffrage movement. She worked alongside prominent figures like Susan B. Anthony and Emily Howland, arguing that the right to vote was an essential component of true freedom and citizenship. She saw the struggle for women's rights as intrinsically linked to the struggle for racial equality. Her own life was a testament to the power and the capability of women, and she spoke at suffrage conventions, sharing her incredible life story as proof that women deserved an equal place in society. Her later years were also dedicated to caring for her community. She established the Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged on her property, creating a safe haven for elderly and indigent African Americans. Despite her international fame, she lived a life of humble service, often struggling financially but always generous with what little she had. She continued to embody the principles of compassion and the communal responsibility that had guided her entire life, from the dark woods of Maryland to the halls of political advocacy. Harriet Tubman's life was a testament to the power of a single individual to change the course of history. She returns again and again to guide hundreds of enslaved people to freedom, risking her life each time for justice.